On December 8, 2020, a Boeing test pilot was doing what test pilots do, flying, pushing the aircraft through its paces at altitude, running through a checklist that had been run 1,000 times before on 1,000 other aircraft. And then, without warning, without any input from the cockpit, the nose of the plane lurched violently upward, then down, then up again. The pilots fought for control, while engineers on the ground watched in real time, unable to do anything but stare at their data screens. This wasn't some experimental prototype. This was Boeing's flagship comeback aircraft. The plane that was supposed to prove the company had learned its lessons. The plane that was supposed to restore trust. After the 737 MAX disasters had killed 346 people, destroyed the company entirely. And it was doing the exact same thing. But to understand why that moment was so devastating, you have to go back. Way back. Because the story of the 777X isn't really about one bad test flight. It's about a company that used to be the best in the world at building aircraft, and the slow, painful process by which it forgot how. In 1990, Boeing was operating at the absolute peak of its powers. The company had just identified a gap in its own product lineup. Airlines wanted something between the aging 767 and the massive 747, not quite a jumbo jet, but capable of flying anywhere on Earth, something with range and efficiency that no aircraft at the time could deliver. What Boeing did next is what separated it from every other aerospace company in the world. Rather than retreating to its own engineering departments and emerging months later with a finished design, Boeing invited its airline customers directly into the process, not for focus groups, not for marketing research, actual engineering input. Cathay Pacific pushed for a wider fuselage. Other carriers weighed in on range requirements and cabin flexibility. Boeing listened, and what emerged was something genuinely new. The 777 became the first commercial aircraft ever designed entirely on computer, eliminating the need for physical mock-ups and compressing development timelines in ways that had never been done before. It introduced fly-by-wire controls to Boeing's commercial lineup. Its engines were the most powerful ever fitted to a passenger aircraft at the time, and regulators trusted it so completely that it entered service with a 3-hour ETOPS rating, meaning it was cleared to fly 3 hours from the nearest airport from day one. That level of confidence from aviation authorities doesn't come easily. It has to be earned from program launch to the delivery of the first production aircraft took just over 5 years. In the world of commercial aviation, that is extraordinary, almost unthinkable by today's standards. And the 777 didn't just succeed, it redefined what a long-haul wide-body aircraft could be. The 777-300ER, the stretched and refined variant that came later, became so dominant that airlines started using it to replace their 747s on routes the jumbo jet had owned for decades. It became one of the most commercially successful wide-body aircraft ever built, and Boeing had every reason to believe that dominance was permanent. It wasn't. In 2006, Airbus launched the A350 program. The original concept was modest, a basic upgrade to the aging A330, new engines on an existing fuselage. But airlines pushed back. They wanted something genuinely modern. So Airbus scrapped the conservative approach and committed to a clean-sheet design with advanced composite construction and entirely new systems architecture. The smaller, a 350-900, wasn't really a threat to Boeing, but the larger A350-1000 was different. Airbus had positioned it as a direct modern alternative to the 777-300. Lower maintenance costs, a newer aircraft with a newer design, and it was aimed straight at Boeing's most profitable segment. For Boeing, the timing could not have been worse. The early 2010s were a period of extraordinary pressure across the entire company. The 737 MAX had just been announced in a rushed response to Airbus's A320neo. The 787 Dreamliner, finally in service after years of crippling delays, was now grounded fleet-wide due to lithium battery fires. And Boeing was simultaneously developing the stretched 787-10 variant, stretching its engineering resources even further across multiple fronts. A clean-sheet aircraft to compete with the A350-1000 was the obvious answer. But a clean-sheet program takes a decade and costs tens of billions of dollars. Airbus was planning to deliver the A350 to 1,000 by 2017, Boeing could not afford to hand its rival years of unopposed market access in its most lucrative segment. So, Boeing made a decision. It would upgrade the existing 777 new engines, redesigned wings, and enough refinement to make the result genuinely competitive. The 777X program launched officially in September 2013, with Lufthansa and Emirates as launch customers. Entry into service was targeted for 2020. The plan looked reasonable on paper. The fuselage was proven. Composite wing technology had already been developed for the 787. Boeing's engineers were confident. After all, how hard could it be to upgrade an aircraft they already knew how to build? This is where the story starts to get uncomfortable. The 777X wasn't a minor update. Boeing had committed to innovations that, individually, each made sense, but together created a compounding chain of complexity that the company was not fully prepared for. The wings alone represented a fundamental departure. To maximize aerodynamic efficiency, Boeing designed a wingspan so large it would push the aircraft into a bigger gate category at airports worldwide, dramatically increasing handling costs for airlines and limiting which airports it could even use. The solution was folding wingtips, a first for commercial aviation. The mechanism needed to be lightweight, reliable, and capable of surviving every aerodynamic load imaginable across decades of commercial service. Boeing built an entirely new composite wing manufacturing facility in Everett, Washington to produce them. The facility cost over $1 billion. And because Boeing planned to use it for a proposed new mid-market aircraft program that would later be canceled entirely, they built it with significant spare capacity. That aircraft never came. The billion-dollar factory was committed regardless, powering the 777X, were GE9X engines from General Electric, evolved from the GE90 that had already powered the 777-300, but massively enlarged. The engine cowling alone exceeded the fuselage width of a 737. Each engine produced roughly 110,000 pounds of thrust, making them the most powerful commercial turbofans ever built. The engineering involved was staggering. And then there was the fuselage. Automation project, Boeing decided to revolutionize how the fuselage was assembled. Traditional aircraft manufacturing is extraordinarily labor-intensive, millions of rivets. Much of the work done by hand, one fastener at a time. Boeing's answer was a system called FAU Fuselage Automated Upright Build, where robots would take over the riveting process entirely, saving time, reducing cost, and improving consistency at scale. But from almost the moment FOB was introduced in 2015, it didn't work the way it was supposed to. Rather than accelerating production, the robotic systems introduced defects that had to be fixed manually. By the same workers, the system was designed to replace. Boeing initially called them teething problems. They assumed refinement and experience would resolve them over time. They didn't. In late 2019, Boeing made a quiet and humiliating announcement. The FOB project was being abandoned. Years of development time and an enormous financial investment had produced something that made production slower and more complicated than the old methods it was supposed to replace. Some limited automation was eventually salvaged for specific tasks, but the grand vision was gone. And with it went years that Boeing could never recover. By spring 2019, the 777X program was running at least a year behind its original schedule. That was already damaging. But what happened next didn't just delay the program, it fundamentally changed the environment in which the program would have to be completed. On March 10, 2019, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 crashed 6 minutes after takeoff from Addis Ababa. It was the second 737 MAX crash in 5 months, and it triggered the worldwide grounding of the entire MAX fleet. Criminal investigations, congressional hearings, and a complete collapse of institutional trust between Boeing and the regulators who were supposed to oversee it. What emerged from those investigations revealed something that would alter the 777X's path entirely. For years, the FAA had delegated substantial portions of its certification work directly to Boeing employees. Boeing's own people operating under FAA authority conducted much of the testing and validation work themselves. The system was built on the assumption that Boeing would honor its obligations. The 737 MAX investigation made clear that assumption had been catastrophically wrong. The FAA restructured its entire approach. It would now conduct far more certification work directly, with its own personnel physically present at Boeing facilities, watching tests in real time and independently validating results. The era of Boeing certifying its own aircraft was over. What came next would demonstrate exactly why that change mattered. In September 2019, a 777X fuselage catastrophically ruptured during a pressurization test. The failure happened at 148% of limit load, just 2%. Short of the 150% threshold required to pass, images spread quickly. Boeing's reputation, already in freefall after the MAX crashes, absorbed another blow.